When I first saw her, she was standing barefoot on her porch, clutching a broken photo frame as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The morning sun spilled over the neighborhood, golden and soft, but her eyes looked like they'd forgotten what warmth felt like. The moving truck had just pulled away, leaving her surrounded by boxes and silence. I didn't even know her name then, but something about her stillness pulled at me like a whisper I couldn't ignore. If you believe that kindness can change lives, that sometimes the smallest favor can start the biggest story, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, because this story is exactly what second chances are made of. Her name was Claire Monroe, and she had just moved into the house next to mine a few weeks earlier. I'd only caught glimpses, her watering the flowers that refused to bloom, her sitting alone on the porch steps after sunset with a cup she never seemed to drink from. The neighborhood was friendly, but people whispered. "Divorce," someone said. Her husband left. Another added, "She lost her little boy a year ago." I didn't want to believe the rumors, but there was something in her eyes, an ache that no amount of pretending could hide. I'd lost someone once too, my wife, 3 years earlier, in a car accident that had rewritten my entire world in one phone call. Since then, I kept my life simple. Work, home, repeat. No noise, no surprises, no new attachments. Until that morning when I saw smoke curling from her backyard. It wasn't much, just a sputtering trail from what looked like a grill gone wrong. I grabbed my hose and hurried over. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out. Claire spun around, startled, her hands covered in ashes. The small fire in her metal bin fizzled as I sprayed it down. She blinked at me through a streak of soot, then exhaled shakily. "I'm fine. I was just burning some old things." I nodded, not sure what to say. The smell of burnt paper lingered in the air. I could make out fragments of photos, maybe letters. "Looks like a rough morning," I said quietly. She laughed softly, but it was a tired laugh, the kind that sounded more like surrender than amusement. "Just trying to move on," she murmured. Something in her tone stayed with me. That night, while washing dishes, I caught myself glancing through the window toward her dark house. There was a single light in her kitchen flickering. I wondered if she was eating dinner alone again. The next day I baked banana bread, something I hadn't done since my wife was alive, and walked it over. When she opened the door, she looked surprised but smiled faintly. "For me?" "Just a neighborly offering," I said. "Thought you might need something sweet." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, if you'd like." Inside, the place smelled faintly of cardboard and dust. Boxes were stacked everywhere, half opened, some never touched. On the mantel, there was only one photo frame, the one I'd seen her holding before. It showed a man with kind eyes and a little boy grinning at the beach. She caught me looking. "My husband, Mark," she said quietly. "And my son, Toby." There was a pause. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't ask. Instead, I handed her the bread and told her she could keep the plate. We talked about small things, where she worked, how she hated the city traffic, how the birds around here woke her up every morning. When I left, she thanked me with a small smile that almost looked real. Days passed, then weeks. Sometimes I'd see her struggling with groceries and help carry them in. Sometimes she'd stop by with leftovers so it wouldn't go to waste. We never talked about the past, but silence slowly turned into comfort. One Saturday afternoon, I was fixing the fence between our yards when I heard soft sobs. I turned and saw Claire kneeling in the dirt beside a patch of wilted tulips. She was holding a small toy truck, its paint chipped, its wheels missing. My heart clenched. "I used to plant flowers with Toby," she whispered without looking up. "He used to drive his little trucks through the mud while I worked. He called them his garden monsters." Her voice broke. "I thought maybe planting again would help me feel close to him, but nothing's growing anymore." I knelt beside her. "Maybe they just need a little more time," I said gently. She looked at me then, eyes red and raw, and asked something that caught me off guard. "Do you ever stop missing them?" The question hung between us. I wanted to give her hope, but honesty won. "No," I said softly. "You just learn to live with the missing." That was the day she started talking more about the accident, about how her husband had left 6 months later because the grief had turned them into strangers. He said he couldn't look at me without remembering, she said, as if I wasn't remembering every second of every day. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just sat with her until the sun began to fade and the shadows stretched long across the grass. From then on, our days intertwined quietly. I helped her repaint her kitchen. She helped me fix the leaky sink. She started baking again, and I started smiling again. The walls around her house and my heart began to fill with life again. One afternoon, rain poured suddenly, drumming against the rooftops. I ran over to close her windows before the storm worsened. When I stepped inside, she was sitting on the couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She looked up, surprised. "You came over just for that? Didn't want your books getting soaked," I said, shaking the rain from my jacket. She smiled. "You're always doing favors, aren't you?" "Just being a good neighbor," I replied. But as I turned to leave, she said softly, "Stay a little longer." The words froze me mid-step. She patted the seat beside her. I hesitated, then sat down. We listened to the rain together, neither of us speaking. It felt like the world had slowed to a heartbeat. After that day, something shifted. She started inviting me over for dinner now and then, and I stopped pretending I wasn't waiting for those invitations. The loneliness that had defined both our lives began to blur around the edges. We didn't need grand gestures or declarations, just quiet presence, the kind that said you're not alone anymore. Still, healing isn't linear. There were days when she would close off completely, staring out the window for hours, lost in memories I couldn't reach. And there were nights when I'd wake from dreams of my wife's laughter echoing in an empty room. We were both haunted by what used to be, but somehow sharing the silence made it bearable. One morning, I found her porch empty, no coffee mug, no sign of her. A note was taped to my door, "Gone to visit Toby's grave, needed to do it alone. Thank you for being here when I couldn't be." That single note made my stomach twist. I spent the whole day restless. Evening came, and still no sign of her. When I finally saw her headlights pull into the driveway, I hurried out. She stepped from the car, her eyes swollen but calm. "I told him about you," she said softly, "about the neighbor who kept showing up, about how you helped me remember life still has pieces worth holding on to." I swallowed hard. "What did he say?" She gave a trembling smile. "He said he's glad I'm not alone anymore." It was the first time I saw her smile reach her eyes. From then on, we stopped pretending we were just neighbors. We didn't call it love, not right away. We called it healing. We called it company. But one evening, as we sat watching the sunset from her porch, her hand brushed mine and stayed there. No words. Just quiet understanding between two broken hearts learning to beat again. Months passed, and the garden that had once been lifeless began to bloom. Bright tulips, daisies, even sunflowers. She said it felt like Toby's way of saying hello. I helped her build a small wooden bench beside the flower bed, and we carved his initials into it. She cried softly as I did, but this time her tears carried peace, not pain. One late afternoon, I came home from work and saw her waiting by my fence. She was holding that same photo frame, the one with her husband and son, but now there was something different. She'd replaced the cracked glass and tucked a new photo behind the old one. It was a picture of us in the garden, covered in dirt and laughter. "I think I'm finally ready," she said quietly. "Ready for what?" I asked. "To start living again." She looked at me, and I knew she meant with me. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something powerful. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as a storm. Sometimes it comes softly, disguised as a favor for a neighbor. It starts with helping put out a fire and ends with finding warmth again in someone's presence. We never forget those we've lost, but maybe, just maybe, they send us the people who can help us carry the weight of remembering. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that kindness and time can heal even the deepest wounds, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Every story here reminds us that even small acts of compassion can change a life forever. And before you go, comment below, Would you have stayed a little longer? If someone asked you the same,